everyone. I'm Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and I came together with Dr. Tom Cowan today to tell you about our new conference, the True Healing Conference, this October 9th and 10th. And we are super excited because we have this opportunity to focus on the new biology, which is really the old biology with some new technological spins on it, as well as talking about what truly results in healing. We're going to be covering some really fascinating topics such as water and structured water, biophotons, biofield tuning, the holographic blood, and orgone energy. It's going to be really exciting. All these topics to help us understand the true nature of how our bodies work and how we can remain healthy and recover from disease.
There is a different way to think about biology, medicine, science than really most of us have ever imagined. These people who have been at the forefront of really what is a human being, what is life, how does biology work, and that's the only way to go forward, because that is what this whole COVID thing is all about. We need a different way of seeing the world.
We're talking about ushering in a new paradigm of biology and healing that we can be self-reliant, we can learn, and we can actually be really healthy, not chronically ill for our lives, but actually vital and truly alive as we're meant to be.
I am extremely excited about this conference. In the last 18 months, I've learned more about biology, medicine, and in some ways life than pretty much the rest of my life combined. I didn't expect that.
All right, Tom.
All right, I'm very excited. Join us.
As a busy dad and husband, I used to struggle to find time to cook healthy meals for me and my family. What was most challenging was getting enough vegetables in our diet, especially enough variety. We make nutritious and delicious vegetable powders made from beyond organic vegetables grown on small family-run farms. They're loaded with vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals that are necessary to keep our bodies healthy and build a robust immune system. Think of them as seasonings or spices that you use to cook with and can easily incorporate vegetable diversity and extra nutrition into the foods you and your children will eat. Join the thousands of delighted customers and see how our products can make a difference in your life.
Introducing a powerful dietary supplement, over 1 million years in development. A highly concentrated, complex, natural formula, rich in trace minerals as well as fulvic and humic acids. Mother Nature's ancient elixir for energy, revitalization, and long life. Shiljit Mumio means conqueror of mountains, destroyer of weakness. Take in the nutritional wisdom of the ancient past. Unleash the vibrant, healthy being inside. Become the conqueror.
find to be never more relevant than now, that it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And this quote to me underpins this inversion, this chief inversion of what sickness actually is, what disease actually is, right? Because we like to think that even in some of the sort of integrative and functional medicine worlds that, the body is overburdened and it's weak and, it's somehow breaking down and that's why you're sick. That sickness is somehow like a punishment of sorts for, wrong living. And I prefer the framework that suggests that those who manifest symptoms are actually the canaries in the coal mine. These are the rightly sensitive individuals who are expressing for all of us to see, almost in some sort of martyrdom experience. They are expressing what we need to understand about how it is that we are living wrong. So their body's wisdom is making manifest that which requires our attention and awareness. And through this lens, so many of the patients I've worked with over the years who've been diagnosed with highly stigmatized, despite many pharmaceutically funded campaigns to destigmatize diagnoses like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or even postpartum depression, that these individuals are not broken, not weak, not somehow chemically imbalanced, that in fact the expression of their symptoms is a wise response to that which is a fundamental mismatch to their soul. And their body is expressing that, their mind is expressing that, their heart is expressing that mismatch for them to begin to learn the dialect of their own being. So if you look at conventional medicine, right, and you look at just even the language, look at this list, right? These are familiar terms. Even, you walk into a CVS and you could be bombarded with this kind of etymologic underpinning of the warfare that, is expressed through the relationship to the body we are expected to assume through the conventional lens. And this warfare, what are we warring against? Well, we're going to talk in a little bit about the victim triangle, but we're warring against the body itself, right? So somehow you are segregated from this body. The I, the capital I of you, is in relationship to the body, and it's an adversarial relationship, right? There is a war going on with your very humanity, with your humanness, with your flesh, with your inner workings. And that's why, for this war to continue, it is essential that no one pause and ask why. When I was in medical school, and I'm sure, my esteemed colleagues here would concur, I was never encouraged. It was never even framed as a relevant question. Why? Well, it's genetics and it's bad luck and bad timing and whatever poor patient kind of energy of the victim, right? So there's no real yield, as we were taught, to asking the question why. Because if you did, you would begin to personalize what it is that you're experiencing, and you would begin to decode it, you would begin to understand it, and you would begin to integrate this experience into a journey that ultimately leads to greater self-discovery. And that certainly doesn't serve the bottom line of this medical industrial complex. This is one of my favorite quotes because it helps us to see that the truth has been in plain sight all along. And when I started my sort of, endless rabbit hole journey 11 or so years ago, into turning over all of the stones and flipping over all the sacred cows, or whatever the metaphor is, that I had been taught as a dyed-in-the-wool allopathic MD who had suffered, sort of blood, sweat, tears, trauma, and debt to get to this point of, clinical mastery that allowed me to open up my own practice. I really had no trouble finding so much black and white evidence that what it is that I was taught has been held up for scrutiny, has been questioned by those in the hallowed halls of the very institutions that taught me these things, right? So I'm a big believer, as I know, all of us here are, in the role of consent, right? I don't believe in victim consciousness as being the true defining reality that we have opted into, right? So if we are consenting, well, it's quotes like this that help us to see what it is that we're consenting to. And this is Marcia Engel. She says, "It's simply no longer possible to believe much of the clinical research that is published or to rely on the judgment of trusted physicians or authoritative medical guidelines. I take no pleasure in this conclusion, which I reached slowly and reluctantly over my 2 decades as an editor of the New England Journal." Okay, so this is a house of cards that we are playing with. And I spent many years in the game, because it really is a game of information, and challenging that which I, had understood to be true by virtue of my pharma-funded education, right? So the safety and efficacy of so many interventions, the understanding of the etiology of so many of these illnesses. And I'm really at this point, I wonder if y'all are getting here too, where I'm not sure that's the nature of the game any longer, right? Because we all know someone that we have presented incontrovertible evidence to. And we have all of the information. We have the right YouTube video, we have the right medical papers, we have the right Kaufman-Cowan talk to put before someone who is a diehard believer in contagion and germ-induced disease and death. And somehow it literally goes in one ear and out the other. And I think it's those of us who have made a practice of, sort of collecting, curating, and collating information to support our studied perspectives. We have the most experience with the fact that this is not an information game. And there's something else that keeps people stuck, right? So one of the aspects and why the 2 MDs on this panel with me are probably 2 of the I could count on one hand, I'm sure we all could, the MDs who have escaped the cult to the extent that perhaps we have, and I'm sure there's more to escape from here. And I understand why that is, because there is an emotional fortitude, I guess, that is required to withstand the loss of the tribe. We are wired, right? As human infants, we spend our 4th trimester out of the womb. We are completely dependent and helpless. And we rely on our caregivers, not just for food, but for love. If we lose love and touch and all of these ingredients to our sustenance, we will die, right? This is an existential dependency. And so we carry that because, as we'll discuss, we are not initiated to adulthood. We carry that dependency all the way through to adulthood, without resolution. And so the concept of being shunned by the tribe, being cast out beyond the pale, it brings a terror forth in our hearts that literally is the same as facing death, right? So it's not as simple as saying, well, why don't doctors look at the science and really understand and question what it is that they've bought into? Why don't they even read the package inserts, let alone, go down the rabbit holes we've gone down? Well, I'm not so sure it has to do with the fact that they're stupid or ignorant or stubborn. I think this is a much deeper issue. And this is how, perhaps, we find ourselves in, what my mentor, Dr. Nick Gonzalez, called the last remaining religion. And it is so because no one can really see that it is, right? So today, the world over, there is a worship of science as a religion, and that's why it's been called scientism. And like most denominational religions, this can serve as a form of population control. It is not a process of discovery any longer. That's why for many years in the vaccine world, we've heard the phrase, the science is settled, right? And now we hear it all the time, bandied about when you've expressed an opinion that is distasteful to the person listening. And to my mind, science is is that process of discovery that is meant to help us understand the language of the natural world. If it is pitted against what is human, what is natural, then it's likely we are working with a system of control and not a process of discovery any longer. So what is this, control really hinged on? What is the most essential ingredient, if it's not necessarily an info war that we're engaged in, or a difference in perspective or thought pattern? And that's where I think it's important to begin to look at, what could take hold. And I like to remain in positive realism, and in my heart I know that humanity will win. We are winning already. All you have to do is, dance with a group of friends, or, lay down in your backyard, or have an experience of connection to an animal to know that this ingredient of human heart consciousness is already so awakened and awakening even further, that the added ingredient of personal responsibility is just a matter of moving through the fear so that we can resist this collective psychosis that is really it's taking hold. And it's taking hold specifically through our traumas, right? So how could it be that on one street, right, there are two houses with folks in them who are shaming those who are not wearing masks, who are begging for mandatory vaccines, who are, out there, rallying for greater totalitarian energy. And then two other houses, there are folks who are resisting and protesting and wouldn't wear a mask if their life depended on it, and feel that vaccination is a form of bodily rape, right? How could it be that we could be existing in the same reality in this dimension? And is it that those of us who get it, right, those of us on this call, are we more, evolved? Are we more intelligent? Are we stronger? I don't know. Or perhaps at the beginning of our journey of awareness and awakening, did we grow up in households where authoritarian energy of control felt oppressive to our sense of self and felt like a painful rejection of who it is that we are, right? So we can never trust this authority, and we may dedicate ourselves to resisting this authority, whereas somebody else grew up in a household where there wasn't enough structure and there wasn't a sense of investment on their caregiver's part, and so they long for somebody to just make it safe, please, like somebody take the helm. I'm not sure. My sense is that when we go back to our conditioned childhoods, right, where we learned to curate aspects of our personhood so that we could secure approval and love, we hid vast swaths of who it is that we are in our so-called shadow, right? And the reason that, Jung and so many others since have described the shadow this way is because it's not available to our conscious awareness. These aspects of ourself that we hid because we needed to survive, to secure that existential safety that is love from our caregivers. And so now we are in this trauma field, right, where we are being manipulated through our traumas, in my perspective. And we're also being given an opportunity to see that which might otherwise have remained in the shadows, to own it, to transform it, and to integrate it. So, this is Freud's nephew, arguably one of the founding fathers of propaganda, Edward Bernays, and he says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. So this is kind of the trajectory, I guess, that Tom referenced earlier, that we move through, and there's no destination, right? This is a process of self-discovery and personal ownership and an experience of our sovereign separateness that lands us in a place of sovereignty that allows us to also feel connected, right? So it's those two pillars of individuation and connection that are essential. It's holding this paradox of our oneness and our separateness simultaneously. That, we have to swing the pendulum, from those poles so that we can begin to calibrate around this mixed psychology of the adult, because it is the child psychology that can really only hold the split, right? So either something is all good or something is all bad. And often as we, mature, as children, we hold our parents, our caregivers in idealization. It's actually a very sophisticated means of retaining personal power, right? So the ego, you've likely heard many maligning, sort of references to the ego, but the impulse of the ego, in my opinion, is very sacred, right? Because it is referential to that personal power that is the expression of our divinity, right? It's just peeling back the layers of projection between that personal power and how we understand it to exist through our identity. That is this journey, right? So if a child is beaten, by his father, he is more likely to assume that he is bad, that the child himself is bad, than that the father is bad. Because he can control his own badness. He cannot control his father's badness. And to live in a world that chaotic is too much for the psyche to bear. So, there are these strategies. They really work in our early childhood. And so that translates into an idealization of the caregiver, right? Daddy loves me, and he's good, and he's always right. And then there comes a moment, it says rapture, but it's supposed to say rupture, where there is maybe it is a rapture, I don't know, a rupture of trust, right? There is an experience that is so at odds with our concept of what is, that we experience, what's referred to as cognitive dissonance. And we either have to ignore what happened, right? And just selectively, deny it, or we have to revise our concept to make room for this experience that otherwise doesn't fit, right? So when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis some 11 plus years ago, and I put it into remission through lifestyle change after having, dyed my hair black, taken birth control for 12 years, eaten McDonald's practically on the daily, candy, never exercised, didn't even know what meditating is. Okay. When I put it into remission through basically dietary change, and I saw in black and white that this remission was achieved for what otherwise I had learned was a chronic and potentially recidivistic illness, I could either have just sort of not made a thing out of it and gone on with my life, right? Or I had to look at how this did not fit with my understanding of gene-driven bad luck, ordained illness, right? This remission didn't work in that rubric because it was achieved through lifestyle change, which I have been taught was irrelevant, right? Irrelevant. In medical school, we have like an hour of nutrition training, or we used to. I'm sure it's maybe 10 minutes now. And it really consists of like, your heart disease patient should probably not eat a ton of salt, and your diabetic, tell them not to get the big gulp soda. Okay. So I had to experience and move through that rupture of trust. And where did it take me? And where it takes many, if not all of us, is into the flip side of idealization, which is vilification, right? So I was pissed. I drew my sword and I ran onto the battlefield, naked, okay? And I was gonna kill pharma, right? And make them pay for all of the lies. And a good number of years of my early activism was in that energy. In fact, my first book is really energetically written from that place. Dozens and dozens of references, and a sense of needing to be right relative to the offending authority. But the truth is that you still are referencing that authority as a bigger entity that you will demand serve you properly, right? That is not sovereignty. And that's why, when we did the Thank You Body rally, the Kaufman came down for, and we had an incredible experience. The impulse of that, and the impulse of even celebrating the new biology as we are here, is non-referential. It's non-oppositional. It's like, yeah, you do your thing. I'm watching. I got it. I see you. And over here, I got amazing things going on. And they feel expansive. They feed me. And I'm good, right? So sovereignty is this experience of holding that mixed object. Yes, you know what? Conventional medicine got a lot of darkness, right? Like any cult does. But at the heart of it, perhaps is something beautiful, right? Perhaps it is the desire to save and help and really care for, right? And it's been distorted and inverted and permuted, and so to hold as mixed pretty much everything, right? That nothing is to be fully idealized or fully vilified, lest we give away our authority and engage in the projection of our shadow material that we are as of yet not conscious of. Because what we see as bad in totality is invariably going to contain aspects of ourself that we need to war against on the outside, because it's way more comfortable than owning it. The way that Tom did at the beginning. It's very vulnerable. It's very uncomfortable. When all this started, last year, feels like 10 years ago, in 2020, one of the first practices that I engaged was to really look at my own life and look at where it is that I myself am expressing authoritative, totalitarian energy. And guess what? I found it, right? Found a little bit of it in my mothering, so I decided my kids' rooms are their rooms. If they want, with some sanitation parameters, if they want to, leave a pile of dirty underwear in the middle of the room, till the end of time, that's their prerogative. And I stopped, simple little things. I stopped saying like, try this food or just have one more bite. Not that I did a ton of that, but it's like a really unconscious reflex, and it's control based. And it is insinuating to my kids that they actually don't know best whether they should take another bite, and they actually don't know what their space should feel like in their own domain, right? So I quit that. I stepped down as CEO of my own company and engaged a different partnership-based business model, things like this. And I re-recorded all of the videos for Vital Mind Reset for my online program, because I felt like, on looking at those videos, there is too much of that I know better, what you need energy, and too little of here's where I'm at, here's what I've seen, are you interested, right? Invitational energy. And so this is really operative, I think, in so much of what we are seeing play out right now, where those who are in, if you can see where I'm pointing, you can't, but those who are in the idealization compliant phase are experiencing mommy medicine and daddy government as parentified authorities, that it's unsafe for them to challenge. Whereas many of us who are on the, F this side of the aisle are vilifying those very authorities, right? So it's bad mommy medicine, bad daddy government. And how do we get to, freedom? What does it look like? Well, I think it's important to also recognize the role of ritual, right? So if they, if we want to call them they, okay, whatever, the dominant establishment, they offer a lot of rituals that create a sense of belonging. Remember that image of like being ostracized from the tribe. what are we creating, right? Ritualistically, what are we doing to establish coherence around values and beliefs, right? So this is an amazing quote about vaccination from John Rappaport, who's one of the only people who's been talking about vaccination this way for so long. And it really helps you to see, like, okay, are we really going to debate the contents of the vial? Is that really what this is about, right? Because children, at least in this country, are vaccinated with Hep B on the day of birth. Why? Is it really because the establishment is concerned about, the capacity that child has to contract? I mean, it's like in plain sight that they chose like an STD, so-called, through their lens, vaccination on the day of birth. They want you to know that's not what it's about. This is a ritual, just like circumcision, just like medicalized birth, right? So he says the ceremony of vaccination is a rite of passage for the child. He is now more than the offspring of the parents. The child is the property of the village, right? So this is how it is that we consent to give our children to the state, right? We offer our bodies to the state. And if our bodies were offered to the state when we were infants, how do we reclaim them, right? What does that look like? Well, I think it's important to kind of zoom out a bit, right? And to look at these mindsets, because the way that you're thinking about what is happening in your life is probably the greatest determinant to what actually is happening in your life. No matter, what you tell yourself is happening. It's how close are you to really grasping the way in which your mindset is coherently expressed, right? Because you can be all freedom fighting in one dimension and honestly a totalitarian asshole in another. And if you can't get congruent and coherent, you're going to continue to invite experiences that will allow you to do so, right? Like, for example, I am taking, I've been driving for something like 30 years. I've never gotten a ticket, weirdly. And, where you could get points on your license, all this stuff. And I'm taking this incredible Law for Mankind course right now. I'm really into it, and I'm recognizing that, wow, I'm not even sure I want to be, adept at this, let alone am I at the point where I can really dive in. So it's very intimidating. And I got the first ticket. I got, pulled over. It was like a sting operation. There were like 6 of us pulled over at once at this obviously stoptional stop sign. And I could really experience, like, my heart was racing. I felt like I wanted to give a lot of sass to this cop. And instead I just kind of froze and took the ticket, right? Why did that happen? It's an opportunity for me to, first of all, evaluate the fear that I have. And you can't go down that, law common to I path if you're going to hold that fear with you. It's not going to work, right? And also for me to see, wow, okay, I got a lot of sovereignty in the health and medical realm, not a ton in the realm of law. So, these mindsets, the materialist mindset that's really on display right now, where we live in a random universe and you got to put this mechanical barrier for these particles that are coming to get your body. They're bad, your body is good, but when sometimes your body's bad and then you need the good doctor, it's like this very sort of split, very reductionist consciousness versus, this consciousness that really recruits meaning. And I always think about, in psychiatry, there is something called referential thinking. And it literally pathologizes the meaning making that you might do, of course, in a state of so-called psychosis. And it says that there is no meaning out there, right? So if you sat and prayed that morning, to make a friend who has red hair, and then you go to lunch and somebody with red hair sits down next to you and you hit it off, that is literally a psychotic symptom if you make meaning out of that, right? So the vitalist perspective is all about infusing every dimension of your life with meaning. And so to get really clear on which mindset are you in, right? And are you applying that to all aspects of your life? And that's why I do think that we're being given this opportunity through this, really what I think is a spiritual war, to get clear on which domain we are choosing to occupy and get coherent, right? So I think it's an opportunity for all of the black to go in the black, all the white to go in the white. And, that little dot, of course, is going to infuse and inform the complementarity. But if you are pro-human, what else does that invite you to look at? Does it invite you to look at whether or not, spending your day gazing down at your, cell phone screen is really consistent with being pro-human? I don't know. If you are, pro-technology, what does that mean that you might not be so interested in experiencing, like illness that you can otherwise medically, pharmaceutically prop yourself up around the illusion of preventing and subduing, right? So getting organized, that's why this divide and conquer strategy is very effective, of course, at generating learned helplessness and praying and begging for it to end. And there's a way to kind of reframe that where it's coming into complementarity. I think these polarities are what's on deck for us to navigate, right? Masculine, feminine, race, understanding of health. These polarities and how we relate to that which is not us, that which is not I, right? That is, I think, where the true spiritual distinction lies, right? Because you can be on the pro-human side and you can relate to the pro-tech, pro-AI, pro-cyborg side, let's say, and you can do so with the consciousness of that very same side. Does that make sense, right? So Nietzsche said it's like becoming the monster that you're fighting. And it's very, very real right now. It's real, people. We have to look at ourselves and understand whether or not we are comporting ourselves coherently, and we're really, really, again, starting with the basics of our understanding of how it is that we're living our life. So I've said many times, I'll say it again, that I think that victim mentality is the only human pathology because it generates pain, suffering, and an experience of illusory deception that is self-imposed. And it is the appropriate psychology of the child, right? So because of that dependency that I referenced, we grow up in this like, poor me, wah, wah, no fair, I have no power because my parents have treated me like I have no power, and I've taken on that illusory belief system, right? Because one way to break this spell, if you have children, is to treat them with reverence. Raise your children with reverence, and they will not experience this pathology that we are all struggling with, right? Where we experience others as doing to us. We outsource responsibility. We do not understand the co-creative aspects of our lived reality. We blame and we sit there waiting, for someone else to fix it for us. This is, why we have an entire medical system just like purring like a kitten, on the dimensions of victim consciousness that we offer up to that system, right? We have the chemical imbalance theory of mental so-called illness. We have the cholesterol theory, like, oh, you're clogging up your arteries with that state kind of thing. And, maybe you also brought some bad genes to the table, so you just got to clear them out with this medication. We have the cancer mutation theory. It's just a random, horrible thing, and got to beat my cancer, kind of like false, sort of valor that's recruited. And of course, the germ theory is really the ultimate because of how it is that this shadow projection of the bad demon really is recruited with a sense of, again, whether it's the asymptomatic carriers, you're just in victimhood. That default, everyone apparently is now. It's been extrapolated to an extent that's almost comical at this point. But it really is the ultimate victim consciousness in expression. And so these labels that we take on when we take on these diagnoses, they fundamentally keep us disconnected from our vital force, from our innate power. And they give us like this surrogate hit, right? So many of my patients have told me, that when they were first diagnosed, they felt validated because they've been walking around with this belief that something is wrong with them. And finally, somebody in a white coat, of the priest has come over and anointed them, right? Yes, you do something. You were right about how it is that you've been wronged, by your genes and your difficult experience. So these are like hexes, right? This microvalidation is indeed a hex that brings you into the vibration of that victim consciousness, and importantly brings you into the energy of the drama triangle, right? Where now you're the victim, you're going to recruit a rescuer in the form of your doctor or the system or whatever, and who it is that you're fighting, it's going to, vacillate, but most of the time it's going to be your own body, and no one wins. This drama triangle is about suffering. So what do we do, right? Like, what do we do about this? I, as I mentioned, am a huge believer in getting back to basics. If you are somebody who is struggling to any extent with the feelings of helplessness and powerlessness that are really being programmed in us, get back to the basics. And, from my perspective, that has a lot to do with lifestyle choices. So my primary qualification for offering this, framework is that, believe it or not, psychiatrist means a doctor of the soul. I never heard the word soul in my entire training, fellowship, residency, internship, you got it, like the whole thing. Even if I had heard it, I would have rolled my eyes at it. So I was very much in resonance with the system that I signed on for. But it's important, again, to recognize those canaries in the coal mine. If you're struggling with, feelings of agitation, vigilance, worry, hopelessness, is something wrong with you? Or, is something really right with you that is inviting you to the alignment with your own power that will feel like freedom? Doesn't matter whether in the 3 dimensions you are actually enjoying freedom. This is an internal experience that must come first, in my opinion, before you can begin to manifest the external evidence of your own emancipation. So it's really essential that we first acknowledge that we don't have, at least in this country, a cultural context for navigating difficult so-called negative emotions. In fact, in the latest iteration of the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, that is something like a ballooning Bible of, pharma-decided parameters of normalcy. In the last iteration, the bereavement clause was eliminated for a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And what that means is that if you have been struggling for more than 2 weeks, even if your beloved was hit by a truck, 3 weeks ago, you are a candidate for diagnosis with a chemically driven and chemically resolved or mitigated pathology. Something is wrong with you, right? And, the truth is that we are, as far as I know, we are the only species on this planet that cries. So what is that, just a random detail of our physiology? Or is there something very essential as a guiding force, as maybe even a reason that we incarnated to our experience of our feelings? So part of what it is to turn towards lifestyle, turn towards those choices that you're making every single day and begin to make more coherent choices every day is a journey, right? Is that it is a self-initiation. We are not initiated, right? We don't go on vision quests. Most of us have natural childbirth. We just kind of cruise from our adolescent psychology into adulthood and take on all these responsibilities without the emotional mastery that would afford us the capacity to, create a life of expansion, abundance, and joy at will. We can't do that because we're bogged down with fighting with what is, not recognizing that we're actually co-creating it, right? Because we have not been initiated to our own power, which requires that we become really familiar with that feeling of moving through terror, right? Of recognizing it as a smokescreen and just walking through it. That is adultification, and this initiation to self can really begin in this very basic way. This is like the cheesiest, but also the most true slide ever. So, as I mentioned, it's really essential to get clear on the story that you're telling yourself, because that will inform your biology. And I often tell this, this little kind of like, I don't know, depict this scene, right? So let's say you're in the Bronx, New York at night, and you are a young, beautiful woman, and you're walking down by yourself, and you're just trying to get home, and you hear these footsteps coming up really quick behind you. What's going to happen? Your physiology is going to reflect danger, right? Your heart's going to speed up. You're going to start sweating. You're going to start breathing shallow. And what happens if you then hear your friend's voice come from those footsteps is you're going to discharge that energy. You might start laughing. Your heart is going to regulate, your breathing is going to regulate, and your entire energy field is going to reconfigure. And the only thing that has changed is what you are telling yourself is happening. That's how powerful our minds are, really, and specifically our stories are. So I like to start with this kind of Maslow's hierarchy of, again, like I said, the chopping wood, carrying water. So first things first, how do you make basic choices in your day-to-day? Like, what water are you drinking? What food are you eating? What time are you waking up? What does, the space that you sleep in actually feel like? Who are you interacting with? Like these little choices every day. How do you make a kind of laboratory experiment? And obviously that's why, I've popularized this program, Vital Mind Reset, that I have been working with, because it's just a simple way to do that. But there's nothing really special about it. I mean, it's like a basic anti-inflammatory diet, basic contemplative practice, basic detox, and it's just grown this field of potential. It's like a portal for transformation, simply because reclaiming the power of choice is the beginning of your walk down that sovereign path. I like to focus too a lot on what I call the psychiatric pretenders, right? Because there's so many things that can drive what you experience as your mental illness, your mental disorder, right? Whether it's, thyroid imbalance or micronutrient deficiency, like B12, whether it's blood sugar instability, whether it's a medication that you're on, right? Like if you're taking Advil or Tylenol here and there, and you're like, what's the big deal? Whether it's a food that your neurobiology is like, hell no to, like gluten and dairy. You can resolve these kinds of physiologic imbalances in the space of a month. And then on a nervous system level, you are so much more prepared, not only because you've been empowered through the gravity of your choices, but also you're so much more prepared literally on an energetic level to begin to look at that which would have overflown, is that a word? Your bucket, overflowed your bucket? I don't know, previously, right? Because if you have brain fog and, your energy is all erratic and you have bloating and your hair's falling out and your joints are throbbing, and then you're like trying to look at this like matrilineal pattern of like sexual abuse that's gone on for 8 generations. No, you can't. That's not the order of operations, in my opinion. So I'm a big believer in sort of starting first things first. I have, played the game of publishing, these studies and what's possible in all of these so-called incurable illnesses. When you do this, that it is literally this accessible to you, and I've, me and a bunch of volunteers have devoted ourselves to evidencing that, because when you know what's possible, your consciousness can say, yes, I'll have that. It's like, I'll order that. The universe is presenting you, like in your fitting room, like, how about this purple dress? And you're like, oh, that would look really hot on me. I think I'll take it. Right. So that's, sort of what I've become really passionate about, is that, it is possible to heal anything. And that it starts, specifically with reframing what it is that you're thinking is actually going on. I know I'm running out of time, so here's a really quick little clip that I find inspirational.
You have the power within yourself to heal through changing your lifestyle and treating yourself with compassion.
Today, I am completely happy. I'm completely healthy. I'm more vibrant than I've ever been. I am on a new career path.
And he said, you no longer have lupus. I felt so different after taking all of that out of my diet. I mean, I consider it miraculous.
I don't have migraines anymore. I don't have vertigo anymore. To me, this is just the beginning.
I was the worst of the worst. And I feel like if I can come back from that, then everyone has hope.
I had not had a good night's sleep in years, perhaps. As I became aware of this layer of anxiety that I was carrying with me everywhere, I could sleep.
You have.
So what happens once you get that under your belt? Well, that's when it really begins, right? So Sayer and two of our dear friends did Vital Mind Reset, this program that's in my books and whatever that I mentioned, for the first time, actually, earlier this year. And I mean, it's like funny and also not funny that everything changes. I got kind of dragged along behind the bus on Sayer's transformation, but everything changes in your life because it was out of coherence. And once the seat of the locus of power is reclaimed through these lifestyle changes, basic ones, then things begin to reorganize. And that relationship, that job, that house, all of the stuff that was from your appeasement energy of like, outsourcing your responsibility begins to reorganize. And so, the first thing is just to generate awareness of what it is in your life that seems like a hot spot of stress, right? What it is that's calling for more coherence, and to continue to dedicate yourself to really understanding who it is that you are. It requires that you get super comfortable with being unliked, super comfortable with being wrong, and super comfortable with understanding how it is that you are participating in that which you condemn. And in fact, how it is that you might be demonstrating through your condemnation and judgment exactly that which you are judging and condemning, right? So understand too that as you're understanding yourself and looking at all these ways that you've like been this like tremendous asshole for all these years, that you have compassion for yourself and understand you were this way because it served you. You were protecting something so delicate and so vulnerable. Some call it the child self, right? This sentient aspect of you that is your feelings, right? That you've never been taught how to actually feel. Because when we feel afraid, we think we're going to die. When we feel shame, we literally could press the reset button on our life in that moment and be fine with it, right? These feelings require a relationship of adult consciousness to hold that very tender space and to protect differently, right? Not defensively so that we don't actually feel the feelings, right? If I get, an email I don't like, immediately I'll craft my response. It's like comes out like a ticker tape immediately. And then I won't even feel the pain that I had of being misunderstood or feeling rejected, the fear that I have that, somebody might actually like abandon my life or whatever, that they maybe they don't love me so much that they don't actually want me in their life, whatever it is that was masked by that defensive response. When you come into a different relationship to your feeling state, which again, I think is best served after you've taken care of cleaning your house, literally and figuratively, then this process, it becomes doable. And then you kind of get good at it and you're like, oh, there I go again. Okay, all right, it's gonna feel like jumping into cold water when I own this, and I'm just gonna do it anyway. You get to know, this child self, because she says or he says things like this. This is not your conscious adult. Your conscious adult does not speak this way. This is when you let your child take the wheel. This is what happens. She drives you to these places. So sovereignty, I think also, we have a series in our membership Vital Life Project that Tom is helped me to populate the gardening one in here. That is really to get walking the walk, right? So as you're doing this emotional work, you're going to be better able to handle, like for me, what it was to come off of my iPhone. Because what came up for me was not about technology. It was about, will I still be valued as worthy if I'm less productive and less available, right? What if I don't have my finger on the pulse and that I can't provide, the world with something useful? Well, then maybe I'll just sink into the invisibility that I feel, at baseline, right? So it's an emotional process that really informs our resistance to claiming sovereignty in these different areas. And then there's so many tools. I think I'm out of time. Some of them that I list here are just really briefly, like you can do, this is my girlfriend Tara Collins from A Guided Soul. She left me this in just a voicemail one day, and she's like, okay, do this meditation where you imagine yourself like surrounded for 3 minutes with this like gross dust. Just be with it. Just be with it. Do nothing to it, and then allow it to dissipate, right? So simple meditations like that build your resiliency around being with that which is uncomfortable. Like I said, looking in the mirror. So when you are judging, just do a quick check about whether or not you are in that moment or in your life doing exactly that which you judge, right? Understand that when we don't actually have something, it could very well be because we don't fully want it. Right? So there are exercises you can do, we do in our membership, where you look at, okay, could it be that I actually don't want what I say I want, and here's why, because I'm afraid that if I have it, this will happen, right? So that's called a divided will. I have a practice every day of creating a mirrored bubble around me every time I get in my car, every time I'm interacting with energies that feel funky to me. These kinds of things help me to, even if it's just a placebo, helps me to feel more resilient. And then look at the places in your life where you're complaining and try to connect to the desire underneath that complaint, whether it's with your partner or at your job or financially, right? Connect to the longing. Desire is a very, very, very powerful world creating force. And it is so much more consistent with empowered and sovereign comportment towards your life than complaint and victimhood. So I remind myself often, I don't even know where I got this from, but of this concept, how can I grow my spine super strong and have my heartbeat super soft, right? This paradox that I mentioned in the beginning. I think that connecting with like minds as we're doing here is a very important part of really sending that signal of safety to your nervous system. And I'll close with this quote from my late mentor. He says, "We are in times of trouble to be followed by the light of peace, the calm of hope realized, the transcendence of truth. Not now, not yet, but soon. We are in the Centennial, the Greek term for the consummation of the ages, a time of confusion, political strife, hatred of truth, governmental oppression, and the rise toward one world dictatorship. Then comes the destruction of truth's enemies, the restoration of the earth, and recognition for those that gallantly stood firm for the truth and its always righteous application. So do not despair. It isn't necessary to do so. The plan is falling into place. These times are but the birth pangs of the glorious world that will follow." He just sent me that in an email in 2014. So quite prescient, and I do feel that in my heart. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing, and it was really an honor to be a part of this experience.
Right. Well, At least I didn't cry this time.
Kelly, that was really fantastic. I mean, there's so much wisdom there, and we have such parallel paths. It's really a treat.
Yes, I know. You make life so much easier that you simply exist for me. So totally agree. Both of you. Thank you. Thank you for this honor.
Okay. I think we should probably close there. I had a theory I was going to run by you, but now I don't think it's appropriate. So I think I'm going to leave. Maybe I should. Let me try it out. So probably the three of us over this past year in particular, but before that, we've been called a lot of names. I've been called liar, ignorant, cheater, and I could go on. I've also been called inspiring and courageous and a bunch of those words. And let me look at the word courageous first, because I do not think that I am courageous. Here's what I think courageous would be. Courageous, and this is to a large part what I think is to running the doctors. Courageous would have been if I had, I quit my residency because I didn't want to vaccinate children 35, 37 years ago. If I had continued vaccinating children, I would have come to the point where I realized I had harmed thousands of children. And by all rights, in a just world, I should have to hear from all those children and parents what I did to them and own it. And I don't think I had the courage to face that. So I got out before I had to deal with that psychological, emotional horror of, oh my God, what did I do? Because I think if I had to, I might have said, I'm not going there. I don't have the emotional resolve to do that. So I'm just gonna, I don't know, pretend it doesn't exist. That to me is courage. And that's I don't see the doctors or most other people being able to do that. And I just would love to hear if that has any resonance for you.
Kelly, you're muted.
Oh, I can't. There we go. I couldn't.
Oh, okay.
Myself. Sorry. Yes, it's so interesting because for whatever reason, I'm constituted to really, really not be sensitive or vulnerable to public criticism. I kind of find it enjoyable, actually, weirdly, and funny. It often feels even all these smear pieces and whatever, it has this energy of the boys on the playground, pulling my braids or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't, it really doesn't, it doesn't get to me. And so when people tell me oh, you're so courageous, there's so much courage, similarly, it falls very flat. And this feels more like a compulsion and a therapy, actually, to have this opportunity to run my mouth and speak my truth. It would be much more difficult for me not to do that and to self-suppress, right? So where I experience courage, and I have, I would say the first time I really felt wow, Kelly, you are a courageous, brave woman, was 3.5 years ago when I, watched the moving trucks pull out of my northeastern driveway and knew that I was taking this leap into this new life in Miami and all that entailed. The pride that I feel in myself is in the moments you're describing, where I can take responsibility for that which I otherwise feel might kill me to do so, right? Yeah. So my daughter, the other day, she didn't want to go to, some thing that was at my friend's studio, blah, blah, blah. And I'm calmly trying to, the wolf is here and the sheep is out front, right? So my energy is totally incoherent. And I'm calmly trying to tell her, to help me understand why you don't want to. And she's like, Mama, you're mad at me. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not mad at you. Right? And she totally smoked me out. And in that moment, I had two choices, like you're saying. I could, defend myself, or I could allow myself to be indicted and own that she sensed me and felt me more accurately than I sensed and felt myself. And to acknowledge that I wanted to control her in that moment, right? And I felt frustrated that she was not permitting me to do so. Those moments of owning our stuff, like I said, it literally feels like you're going to die. It's going to cost you something you cannot spare. That's the signature feeling. When you feel like, if I give this to this person, it could be your lover, or it could be, a Newsweek reporter. If I give this to this person, I may lose something so essential to my safety that I can't afford it. That's the signature. And if you move through and what you're giving is actually your personal ownership of your role in this experience that would otherwise be characterized as a victim experience, moving through that require courage, right? It's like the heart strength in the French, etymology. It requires courage. It's this leap of like, it should feel like that, like, okay, here we go, right? Yeah. And then you do it, and you feel this wash of like self-validation and really self-love. Like that's what it is to clean up, right? So I often just recommend, like, look at all the hotspot stressor relationships in your life. How many are there? Are there 10 discordant dynamics in your life, right? Like, how's your romantic relationship? How's your relationship with your mom? Like, are you not speaking to her going on 8 years? Like, what about your brother? Okay, what about your neighbor? Like, what about your ex's friend or whatever? Take an inventory and show up with courage to those dynamics. It might mean that you say like, hey, can we get on a call? Or it might mean like, hey, I've been thinking about this and I just want to start over, and can we have this conversation differently? Whatever. That is where, the one-on-one, boots on the ground, what does your life look like? Clean that up, please, before you go on, social media or your newsletter or your podcast or whatever, ranting and raving about what the world should look like. Nobody needs that. Nobody needs that from the energy of your, self-denial. Yeah.
All right, everybody, check out Kelly's program. I've seen so many people that have been helped, and Kelly, thank you. It's wonderful to have you join us.
Love you, peeps.
Yes, thanks, Kelly.
Okay, Sally, we're going to do a 6-minute break here, if that's okay. So we'll be back on at 10 minutes till 3. Got it?
Your life is water. 99% of your molecules are water. That's why the structure of that 99% determines the quality of your life. An alemma is an architect of water in your body. It structures the molecules in the water you drink, creating coherence inside your body and mind. Coherence unleashes the body's own natural rejuvenating power. It revives, realigns, and regenerates you. An alemma, the architect of life.
Introducing a powerful dietary supplement, over 1 million years in development. A highly concentrated, complex natural formula, rich in trace minerals as well as fulvic and humic acids. Mother Nature's ancient elixir for energy, revitalization, and long life. Shiljit Mumio means conqueror of mountains, destroyer of weakness. Take in the nutritional wisdom of the ancient past. Unleash the vibrant, healthy being inside. Become the conqueror.